Rings of Power has been busted copying many scenes from its beloved predecessor, The Lord of the Rings, without them actually working. I believe no scene proves this point more than when Galadriel and Theo hide from the orcs under a tree. This was clearly inspired by the scene from the Hobbits hiding from the Nazgul, but the two scenes could not be further apart in what they achieved. So here's how to create tension that actually works. Firstly, let's start slightly before the actual scenes to see how they are set up. Galadriel and Theo were walking through the forest having a heart-to-heart when they hear the orcs and hide. To help illustrate my point, let's take a look at how the characters' emotions change using this model of emotions I borrowed from my psychology degree. Our characters go from upset from talking about their loved ones to stressed because of the upcoming danger. This is a relatively tiny shift, which results in the audience unconsciously misinterpreting the impact of the tonal shift. It's like when driving a car. If you go from 10 miles per hour to 12 in 1 second, you don't noticeably feel it. But if in the same time you go from 10 to 20, it's much more dramatic. That's because the change is not that important, but it is the speed at which the change occurs. Compare this to the Hobbit scene. Right before it begins, we see the Hobbits being happy, making jokes and being excited about finding mushrooms. Then suddenly, there's a massive shift as the danger approaches. This massive change shocks our brain and exaggerates the situation to seem even more stressful due to this perfect juxtaposition. The great writing then continues, as slowly the tension keeps on increasing, as the stakes keep going up and up. First we hear the hooves of the horse getting louder and louder as the danger approaches. Then the Nazgul jumps off the horse and leans over the hobbits. Then we see all the spiders and bugs, which make it harder for the characters to stay quiet. Then we focus on Frodo and the One Ring, knowing if he puts it on, it is all over and they're all dead. In less than a minute we went from bottom of the tension graph to the very top, and it looks like the characters are completely done for. Now let's compare this to the Galadriel scene. They hear the orcs coming, so they hide. Theo then unsheathes his sword and the orcs stop walking. The orc walks closer and we focus on the sword. The first scene had building blocks that added onto each other to keep cranking the tension up and up and up, but in this one it just remains constant until the scene is just done. You can see how similar the scenes are even with the changes in focus. However, in the first scene, where we look at the characters, they are sweating, there's clearly fear in their eyes and the audience can connect to those emotions. But in the Rings of Power, their facial expressions don't change. Yes, they made Theo do a small gulp, but that is not enough if we are meant to be scared with these characters. You also see them focusing on the sword like they did on the ring in the original, but this has no impact. The One Ring could be detected by the Nazgul. If Frodo got persuaded into putting it on, it would have been all over. But this is just a sword. It was silly enough that unsheathing it was loud enough for the orcs to stop walking, but it adds nothing else to the tension of the scene. So why focus on it? We then get to the end of the scene where the orc says he only smells ash and walks away. This was a massive no-no. Not only did they show that the whole scene was an unorganic way at attempting tension, because he didn't smell anything the whole time, didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. Why did he stop to have a look? Was he stopping every 10 minutes just in case? But it also made the main characters so static that the scene did not have to be in the show at all. Compare this to the ending, where one of the hobbits is a dynamic character and throws something as a distraction so that they can get away. Not only further developing the character, but also giving an interesting way to resolve a conflict. Again, dramatically changing the tone from stress to relief, instead of the gradual decline the previous scene had. Finally, previous context is important if you want the audience to be afraid. The Rings of Power writers established Galadriel to be indestructible. Throughout the show, we have seen Galadriel single-handedly kill a cave troll, survive days swimming in an ocean, defeat large amounts of orcs with ease, survive a volcanic eruption. So whilst watching the scene, I was surprised that she didn't jump out and confidently kill all the orcs while saying a one-liner to Theo like, "Watch and learn." It was strange seeing the character who hasn't failed throughout the whole show hide for the first time and avoid conflict. What these writers did for Galadriel was done for the Nazgul in the original film. We got a backstory how they are immortal, how they are Sauron's top dogs, and even saw how intimidating and feared they were. So it made sense that a few fragile hobbits were in grave danger because of them, because as the audience, you knew there was no hope for them if they had to fight. But that's more than a pet peeve rather than a more diplomatic analysis. So to conclude, to not fail at writing tension, it helps if you have a massive tonal shift to emphasize the stress of the situation. It helps if you keep adding more and more stakes until you quickly release it through a character action. And it helps if you don't make the character an unkillable machine that the audience doesn't have to be worried about dying.
You shall subscribe.